Ladies and gentlemen, we had an exciting week this week. I was out of town, but the election court ensued, and now we have results. Ryan Pinder is the declared man for the job in the Elizabeth constituency. We'll get into more details about that as we go on with the show. This weekend, as I told you, I went to check on my grandmother, and thanks to Dr. Let's make sure now. I don't want to get in no trouble for not calling everybody's name. Dr. Roll, Dr. Forbes, who is Sarah Forbes' good son in Grand Bahama, Sandra Mortimer, and Mr. Heal in Health Social Services. My grandmother is fine, she's doing well, and she's been transported to Miami to sit with my aunts and my cousins to make sure that they take care of her very well. I also want to make sure that the good people, the nurses, the helpers, assistants, even a COB student who was learning how to become a nurse at Durand Memorial Hospital know that we are very thankful. Also, a note. It's critical that people here in Nassau understand that Nassau, or Little Nassau, is not all of the Bahamas. While I was in Grand Bahama, I ran into a young lady from Grand Key, Abaco. Now, I've heard of Grand Key, but I didn't know much about it until I spoke to her. Her name is Anta, and she filled me in on Grand Key, Abaco. I also enjoyed a service at my home church, Church of the Ascension, where I learned under the tutelage of now Bishop Cornell Moss, the guy you see running in the talking while he's in the credits. Also, I spent some time at my other home church in Mount Calvary Baptist Church in Seagrape, 8 Mile Rock. My goodness, I had a good time at Mount Calvary. I saw all my old friends when I was growing up as a child, Sister Missick. I saw Penny Roll. I saw Melvern, who I stood in her wedding as a child, and then I started crying and couldn't stand in it, and my brother had to stand in the wedding for me. All these wonderful people. And for the naysayers out there, those who are, the young people call you the haters, and people who are political henchmen trying to make sure that I get off this show. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, there are people out there who are trying to take this show off the air. For those people, let me remember her name now, Miss Ashwood, put a covering over me. Oh, Jesus, Miss Ashwood prayed for me that day in the churchyard of Mount Calvary, next to where Reverend Mullins Sr. was buried. And she made sure that I got my covering. Also, Father Kerr, good man from West End, put me on his prayer list, and I know Cornell Moss, Bishop Moss, is praying for me down from Guyana. So, ladies and gentlemen, the show must go on, and we will have a good show. Also, last note, let's talk about education. I went to Jack Haywood High School, spent some time there making sure that my good cousin, Charles Harvey, had all of his supplies, had everything he needed, and I got a little boost of energy from Jack Haywood High School for two reasons. One, the teachers there, Miss Shield, Miss Roll, the religion teacher, I think he is Mr. Roll, Miss Willis, who taught social studies, they all made me feel like they're willing to work with students and work hard, and I appreciate that. I really appreciate teachers who are willing to work. I also met some smart students. They were having their vocational exhibit at Jack Haywood in the lobby, and I met Charles Rose, who has a 3.92 GPA. Now, listen, I only graduated with a 3.8. He has a 3.92, so it's got to be something in that boy's head. And he's going to be an excellent engineer for the Bahamas one day. I met the deputy head boy. I met some of the prefects. And I had a great time at Jack Haywood High School. Keep doing the good work. Now, this week's show, we have for you the senator who's vying for MP and recently granted his nomination in Marathon, Jerome Fitzgerald. And we also have for you an excellent legal scholar in constitutional law, Dr. Dexter Johnson, a professor at the Eugene Deputes Law School. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back with this review. We can ask some tough questions. We will find out what this election court was all about. And I want to know most of all, did we get justice out of this court? We'll be right back after these messages. back to Citizens Review. We have our panel assembled. We have this PLP Senator, Jerome Fitzgerald, and the legal mind, Dr. Dexter Johnson. I want to start with you, Dr. Johnson. Let's explain to people what this election court process was and how it was different from the last one. There are a lot of people that are a bit confused, and I want to make sure that they understand. This election court process, the writ was filed against the returning officer before the results were certified.
Yes.
It was different from the last process in that the results were certified, the MP was sworn in the name of Byron Woodside and Shivago Lang, and then the writ was filed. But in this one, there was no certification, and this was still a part of the process itself.
I think that one has to understand an election is not complete until you have declared that there's no need for an election court to arbitrate on any issue that might arise. And so, in truth, the election court is a part of the process. And I believe that this incident here shows you that to perfection, that the actual poll was not complete until the protest votes were finally determined for one party or the other, and that is the function of the election court. So I believe that this process that we have seen, this is the best demonstration of how it is actually supposed to be done.
Okay. Senator Fitzgerald, I want to clear this issue up. There are some persons that brought the issue of Cassius Stewart. And Mr. Stewart declared that he would not be participating in the process, but he also said, in addition to that, that he was not able to afford to participate in the process. What do you say to that?
Well, I think I assume he was referring to the part that he may not have been in a position to afford for an attorney to represent him within the court. He had one protest vote that was filed in his favor, which was not recorded because of a administrative error on the part of the Parliamentary Registration Department. And so his vote wasn't really that big of an issue. I think everybody accepted on all sides that that was a vote that should have counted in his favor. But I would think that as part of a political organization such as Mr. Stewart's own, that they would have counsel who either would have worked with them during the election process, and particularly on the day of the election itself and on the recount, that there should be a lawyer somewhere within the NDP who would be willing to move forward and represent them during that time. So
if I could add something there, because as Jerome quite rightly states, it's a matter where you should take legal advice. I was there as a member of the BDM executive at the time, and the issue was looked at. But let me say, first of all, that even if a party is not represented, the election court will do the right thing in any event.
That's right.
You don't actually need to be represented. It's part of the duty of the court to look at any protest ballots and in law ruled on whether they should go for a particular person or not. But in this instance, nothing actually turned on that particular protest vote.
So it didn't make a difference either way.
It really would only slow up the process and add to the time constraints.
So it's fair to say that justice wasn't for sale in this particular case?
No. And in any case, I still want to make the point. Regardless of whether you were represented before the election court or not, the judges will see that justice is done for you.
Yeah, that's a bit reassuring to know. I want to quote something.
And I think that happened.
Yes, it did happen.
It happened.
That vote did count for him.
It did count.
It did, okay.
Yes.
When you play basketball on the court with the fellas, anywhere in Yellow Elder or any other park, there's a rule that you have to win the game by not two votes, but 2
points.
shots, right?
2 points.
If in the simple context of basketball, they make room for a margin of error, how is it that we could allow? Now, let's take all things into context here. We understand, based on the last 2 election court cases, that the register is compromised. That we need at least, to be comfortable, a margin of error of about 150 to say that you need some sort of majority over 200-300 for us to say that even if there are challenges, you won. My question, based on this basic basketball idea with the fellas on the court, is do we have a legitimate election process? Do we really have MPs, or do we have fellas or ladies that somehow scale in on a margin of error? Because we have a lot of different constituencies. Now, not like Bain or Grahamstown, where there's 1,000 people that you win by. It's obvious that Dr. Nottage won Bain and Grahamstown.
Yes.
Not those particular constituencies. But then you have the Pine Woods. And then you have the Marco cities, which ended up in election court. And they end up winning by 30 votes. Even last time in Elizabeth, you end up with some 40 votes, I think it was.
45 votes.
Are we legitimate? What's going on here? Do we have real members of parliament, or do their victories just simply fall within a margin of error?
Well, I think the problem's going to get worse, because I'm predicting in the next election you will have three-way races.
Okay.
In which case the margins are likely to be even narrower. But to answer your main point, the system does work because we have the first past the post, which is a very narrow amount. In this game, you can win by one. Whereas in the basketball thing, you need two. In this one,
But
one.
my question
is it legitimate?
Is it legitimate?
It works.
Because if
It
even in
works.
basketball you need two to win,
Well, let me
It works.
say
shouldn't
that-
there be some sort of equivalent when there are 5,000 persons voting?
But I mean, let me say that you're talking about a basketball game on the court or on the blocks. I mean, there's a professional basketball league setup that has rules and regulations as to how it's to be conducted, and it's
Okay.
set up and it's managed properly. And in that game, you win
You
by
win
1
by
point.
one. Okay.
Right?
And everybody
And
accepts
Well, I
it.
would
everybody
argue that
accepts
they're better organized than our register.
Well, it depends. I mean, you see, one of the issues, one of the issues that we have in this country, and I'll just touch on it if we have a little bit of time, and that is that we now have a population. A big part of our population is transient.
Yes.
You understand? And I came face to face with this working in the Elizabeth by-election with a polling division that I worked in. Over the space of the last 2.5 years, over 200 people had moved out.
Yeah.
In one polling division that had 400 and some people, half of the polling division had moved out. They were not there. The other, they had been replaced.
Okay.
Now, the problem is, with the short space of time to register those people for the by-election, you were not able to register that other 200 to put them back on the register. You were able to maybe register 80 or so, or there was maybe half of them. But that is the issue, and so that's an issue that we're going to continue to have.
Okay.
And that's going to continue to come up unless we find a way to address it as far as amending our laws. If we come and take the basic proposition that as a Bahamian, once you register, I mean register anywhere in the Bahamas,
Yes.
you are
Yes.
entitled to vote.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And it goes back an argument that Fred Mitchell told me Paul Adley always had. And that was that you should be in a position to register to vote in a constituency up to the day of voting.
Yes.
You understand?
Of course.
And so
Yes. I
if you
agree with
take
that.
it to that, if you take it to that extent, and you accept that if you want to register, let's say in Yamoussoukro and you move in Elizabeth, but within the law you qualify to vote in Elizabeth, and you could register to vote in Elizabeth, might not be on the day, but up to a day or two before, then to a great extent that register would be whole and reflect those who live in that area. Now, until we could get something like that, we can continue to have these problems. I don't honestly see how we're going to think that overnight we're going to fix it, because the population moves, and the way the law is done is not, the law is not drafted for a transient population.
It's not.
In a sense, it does cover that gap, though, because as was demonstrated in this instance, it has always been that if you can show that you do reside in a particular geographical area, that's a constituency, and you can prove that you are over age and a Bahamian citizen, your right to vote will be respected. Hence this thing about bringing your passport to prove who you are.
Okay.
And this is where I believe that the learned senior QC, who is taking the point that the register is final, is in error.
Big error.
Because the intention is that each citizen's critical right to vote shall be made
Paramount.
practical.
That's right.
And therefore, it is the underlying intent which the learned judges have looked at. So,
right.
if I am not on the register, but I live in this constituency, I can prove I'm a Bahamian, I'm over the age of 18, here is my passport, I should be allowed to vote
be good to
on a protest ballot. So the protest ballot exercise has actually shown us that the register itself is capable of being supported by other documentation so that the critical right of each citizen to vote can indeed be made real.
So are you saying that our register in effect functions as it is?
The totality of what it intends to do functions.
Right. That's
The actual physical register is the most efficient way of trying to make the whole process orderly and to do it timeously, because you don't want everybody coming,
That's right.
here is my passport.
Let me-
There's a simpler way, you see.
Let me make a point too, and that revolves around voter F, which was
Yes,
the
that's the
really challenging vote, and the court recognized that. Voter F, the issue that arose with voter F is that under the Act, the presiding officer makes a determination as to whether or not that person should or should not vote.
Yes.
The presiding officer, looking at the documentation voter F brought, was satisfied that voter F lived in the constituency.
Yes.
Now, he could have said to himself, no, you cannot vote. He decided that this person should vote, but vote on a protest ballot,
Yes.
which happened, all right? What the court said in that case, because I heard the Prime Minister and others
Yes.
really misrepresenting what the
Totally.
legal position is.
Totally.
What the court said is that the Act gives the presiding officer the
discretion
discretion to make that
determine
decision.
that, yes. Okay.
And once he made that determination, it is not for us, the court, to decide whether that was right or wrong. It is only for us to decide whether or not that voter had a legal entitlement to vote.
That's it.
That was it.
And that's the
And the
correct
court
interpretation.
decided that that was it. And legally, they are 100% correct.
I would support that 1,000%.
You understand?
And
And
that
so
is indeed the position.
When I hear the Prime Minister and the Chairman, Mr. Bethel, making the comments that I've heard, it's just irresponsible, because as public officials and as leaders in the country, you have to discharge your responsibility to tell the truth and to disseminate
But there is an
the
alternative,
information
though,
as you
Jerome.
understand it. You
It
know?
may be that it isn't that they are being irresponsible. It may be a matter of legal ignorance.
Well, they're both
that-
lawyers.
and that is-
I mean, they're both lawyers,
Yes,
and, that,
but
and that's
having,
why I said.
I teach them, and for 10
see.
years I've noted there's a big difference between the person who's trained university-wise and the person who goes in articling in the way in which some of them have done. They are still steeped in parliamentary supremacy.
I see.
They don't understand the basis is the rights of the individual.
Well,
So
Carl Bethel has a very good legal mind. He went to London School of Economics.
I would
in
like to
London,
think
and
so.
I would
too
think
many
that he could have
times when
grasped-
Mr. Bethel has been wrong.
Yeah, no,
As
that
the
part
legal
I agree.
academic
That-
teaching this thing
no,
for 10 years,
that
I
part
can
agree.
tell you
That part I
there are
agree.
numerous instances
That part I
when the
agree.
interpretation has failed to take into account
Yes.
the jurisprudence of a written constitution. See, the original law was based in property.
Yeah.
The new law is based in the person.
That's right.
Hence, the right of the citizen is the paramount
It's paramount.
consideration.
Yeah, paramount.
And so
That
all of
sounds
the
good.
law
That's
is
it.
directed towards making sure that we, the citizen,
Yeah.
are not subjected to any tyranny. That's the fundamental thing.
If you look at the argument, and I said this to the candidate for the F&M in the court, I said, if you look at the basic argument for both sides, the F&M's argument was that the register was paramount,
Yes, yes. that's
which
wrong.
really is ridiculous.
Just wrong, just
and,
wrong.
And to support their case, they brought in a case that was over 100 years old.
Yes, it's just not.
The Progressive Liberals Party's point was that the right of the voter is paramount.
That's the correct point.
Yes.
You understand?
That
And
is
what the
the correct
court
point.
did was the court agreed
Which
that
is-
the right of the voter is paramount.
They were correct in
You
law.
understand?
Very
And so
correct.
that's what the
It's not
case
a
turned
political
on. And
thing.
if you looked at it
the
from
law.
that standpoint legally, initially, that is why those who were on the PLP side who understood the law,
Yes.
we were confident from day one that we
Yes.
were going to win.
Well, I
because
was
we were
on the PLP
confident-
side, and I was taking odds that would be the issue.
Yeah, we were confident that at the end of the day, the
We have
court
to-
would take the position that the right of the voter is paramount.
We have to go to a break on this. Dr. Dexter Johnson says there's some legal ignorance amongst the leaders of our country. I
Gross,
say stop
egregious.
letting lawyers run the country.
No, I wouldn't say that.
We'll be back after
No.
these messages. Ladies and and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. We're having a heated legal discussion here with our legal mind, Dr. Dexter Johnson, and our Senator and Attorney, Senator Jerome Fitzgerald. My question, gentlemen, my next question is, should the court have taken some responsibility in this process? And let me put that into full context. There were 2 election court cases that followed this one, and they were very recent.
Yes.
The court found the same kind of challenges with the register. Let me read what was given in this particular ruling. The court said in number 67 of the ruling, again, this process has exposed failures, omissions, and errors on the part of the parliamentary commissioner and his staff, which may, if not corrected, threaten the fairness of the electoral process and ultimately our democracy. Yes. This is what they go on to say. We can emphatically say the parliamentary commissioner must be provided sufficient resources, both financial and human, to ensure that he is able to properly discharge his duties.
Yes.
What I would suggest is this should be an order, not a suggestion, so that this time around we would have been able to hold the minister and the parliamentary commissioner in contempt of court for not having sorted out the register the way they should have. Should the court be more active on this issue?
Well, I mean, in order to get an order, I mean, someone would have to apply to the court for a particular order to be granted.
So is it not...
That wasn't done in this case, and I don't know really, you know, who would do that. But let me just make another point with regard to the problem with the register, and this is another thing that needs to be addressed, and that is the fact that almost in every election the boundaries are changed.
Yes.
You know, and this is very confusing to the voter, because you could be in one constituency one time, and then the next time you move in another constituency. And a lot of times you don't even know until you go to vote that this is not actually your constituency anymore, because you may have been on the boundary before, and now the boundary, I mean right on the boundary line, being the boundary road, and now it's changed.
And that was the challenge with some voters in this particular election.
Well, that happened. That happened to the voter. That was voter number 8.
Yes.
Voter A. That happened to voter A because she was on the. Well, what happened? They registered her on the other side of the road, which put her in Fox Hill. But when they cut the boundary, they then cut the boundary right on her line, and she was then inside Elizabeth, and she went and changed it.
Yes.
But the point is, she only knew that because her husband had a different voter's card. When he went in, they gave him a different one to her. And when they looked at it, she said, well, hold on a second. We
same
got
house.
Be the same house, but be in a different constituency.
And
that's how they got to find out. Failing that, I suspect she would have stayed in Fox Hill.
But my question, Dr. Johnson,
yes,
is could
it's
the
a very
court
important
have been
question.
active? Is it upon the justices to force them to do something?
You've got to understand the separation of powers principle. The courts have a limit beyond which it cannot go.
That's right.
And they cannot make orders that require the expenditure of money, because the court does not contain the purse strings. I would say that the courts have throughout discharged their obligation. They have advised, they have recommended, but the actual decision is an administrative one for the government of the day, because they control the purse strings. Yeah. So under the separation of powers, the most that the court can do is decide this issue and make recommendations. It has to go to the other arm of government, the executive or the legislature, to determine when this can be funded, how it can be funded, because they control the budget.
So you're saying that the government and the minister are responsible in light of the fact that there have been 2 previous recommendations in Marco City and Pinewood. They ain't do what they're supposed to do.
Let's be blunt. They have slunked. They have had to be told again.
The third time.
Yes, which is
to their own peril this time.
Which is very bad, because we know that the essential right of the citizen is this whole question of the right to vote. That is what we got in 67. That is the cherished possession of each Bahamian. And to make sure that it is real, the Parliamentary Registrar's Office, that is their function. And it is government that must safeguard that. And I would say that the present government have failed miserably despite having been told. And they're still failing, because today we should have already heard that they have adopted the recommendations and that they have moved with all speed to ensure that in the shortest possible time, this is not the court. The court is not to be blamed.
That should have been the
press
message.
conference that they
That's
had
right.
yesterday.
That's
Give
exactly
confidence and make the voters understand we do what we must so that you, the voter, can have your right 100% influence.
Well, I would like it to be known that I attempted to get an F&M attorney on this show to review these results. Somehow, everybody busy this week. So I just want that to be known.
Is it about the Bahamas and us, or is it about their own partisan interests? I'm sure that Jerome holds the view that I hold. It's about what to do best for the Bahamians.
Jerome may feel that way. I wouldn't suggest that the PLP or the F&M
Well, I'm talking about Jerome and myself, because I believe that we are on the same wavelength, that it is for the Bahamians.
No two ways about that.
Well, next question. Is this process over? People saw the press conference with the Prime Minister yesterday, and they're asking themselves questions. And we have until April 14th, and y'all know that's good ways away. There's a lot that can be done from now till the 14th, and Papa, the Prime Minister, is known for pulling a move or two. What can happen? Is this process over? Do we have an MP, because he's not sworn in yet?
Well, my position on that would be, I mean, if you take the Prime Minister at his word that he doesn't believe in going to election court, although in the past he has done so, that would mean that he doesn't intend to contest this matter in election court. But I also think that it's been a fierce battle between both political parties. There's a lot of issues facing this country which need to be addressed and need urgent attention. And to get involved with trying to find a mechanism upon which to either delay or somehow prohibit Mr. Pinder from going into the House of Assembly would seem more of a political motive as opposed to any real motive at all. And I think the general public, I mean, F&M, PLP, BDM, NDP, whoever you speak to, are just sick and tired this now. The election is finished. The courts have declared a winner. And that's it. Let's move on, swear him in, and go and do the business of the country. Okay. I think anything that the Prime Minister does to try and prohibit or stop that will result in further backlash from the general public.
Well, let me ask this question.
Go
ahead.
I think Jerome is being very nice. He's a much more diplomatic person.
Please don't be diplomatic on the show. Give us the raw.
It would be petty to continue with this argument.
Well, some suggest that it was petty in the first place.
Well, you see, in the light as Jerome has begun to state of our pressing problems of crime, unemployment, the debt, the specter of devaluation.
That's what I'm saying.
But on the strict legal
there are
point,
F&Ms who suggest that the PLP was petty for filing the lawsuit in the first place.
No, the process was not complete. You see, there is a difference. The process is not complete until you see, we have to be clear on what is the law. And the law must always be seen to be done. And the protest votes are never final until the election court has ruled on them. So there's a difference.
If the F&M and or the government files an appeal to this process, that is within the boundaries of the law.
The boundaries of
I don't know if they can appeal.
They can review it. There's a thing called judicial review, whereby you can check to see whether the law was actually carried out. What they cannot do is go back and say the judge was wrong to believe this voter that came before them and gave evidence, you see. So there's a very narrow issue, the one of, is the face of the register itself final, or is the underlying principle that each voter is entitled to his vote? Which of these is the two? And to me, that's not an issue.
So you're saying that to conduct this review would be petty?
I think that it would be ill-directed at this time. I believe that the fact that the two judges were happy about the 5 really shows you that you're not going to reverse it. But I have a problem because I think that 2 judges was a little dangerous. Normally you should have 1, 3, 5, 7, an odd number so that if there is a difference of opinion, you can have a majority vote. So I was curious, as a teacher of the law, I don't know of a precedent where 2 judges were put. Suppose they were both tied. We would really be in a real quagmire. So normally to avoid that, you have 1, 3, 5, a tie-breaking situation. But it's an issue where I believe to go on with it now, petty. I believe that we need to get to the real issues. In fact,
Oh, yeah.
the whole Elizabeth election has diverted us, as Jerome would agree,
Yeah.
from some critical problems
I do
that
agree
need
with
to be dealt with.
Okay, all right. We're going to take this break. That's a good point to stop off, and we have some other issues to cover. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the last segment of our intense legal discussion about the Elizabeth electoral election court process. Sorry. We have Dr. Dexter Johnson and we have Senator Jerome Fitzgerald. Let's get back into the issues quickly. What precedent is set by having an election won in the court? The last two election court battles, they did not overturn, they didn't change the results to any significant the MP stayed the same.
Yes.
In this case, although it was a bit different because the results were not yet certified, we have a different person that has supposedly won the seat.
Yes.
What kind of precedent is that setting? What does that say about our process? What will that affect in the future?
I think that what we have seen is a very transparent process, whereby if there is a dispute, it is settled at the end of the day, not by self-help, but by the court.
But it makes people uncomfortable.
But
People
this is
saying
our
that
system.
they don't want this done in the courtroom.
This
The
is
Prime
our
Minister is very uncomfortable about
Well,
it.
he
So
doesn't
says,
want the rule of law then.
Yeah.
That's right.
This
I
is
believe
the,
it comes
the,
with the rule of law.
this is the rule of
There are
law
people
at
in
its
the
best.
Bahamas who do not like this idea of things being decided in the courtroom that should have been decided at the ballot box.
I have a problem with all of them because that is fundamental to our
That's the
system
balance.
of our society.
Yeah. Okay.
The rule of law whereby any issue that has to be determined is determined according to law in a properly constituted court that we can go in and see what actually is done.
But there are other ways to do it. For example,
but
in
I
the
mean,
United
but-
States.
Are they more
when it's-
transparent?
Well, I don't know. I don't think
Didn't
we're
in the
any
Bush,
more
remember with
transparent than they are.
Mr. Gore and Mr. Bush?
It
You
was
remember?
decided in the courtroom
In the
again.
court, and everybody accepted it, Aaron.
Everybody accepted it, but
Everybody
it was,
accepted
we
it.
all find
right.
issue with
Democracy at
it.
its finest.
That's right.
I don't think Bush and Gore was democracy at its finest.
Well, to date, it's the best, it's the closest we have gotten. To have a dispute of that magnitude settled by a court of the land transparently, and everybody
But
could see
that's,
the process.
that is my challenge. When you make that kind of comparison, right?
Yes.
Al Gore would suggest to you, and some Democrats and some Bahamians, that George W. Bush stole that election. Now, I'm not suggesting anything about Mr. Pinder or Mr. Sands. What I'm suggesting is, someone called me and said, why don't they, anytime they have a challenge, send it back to the polls to be done over, similar
it's
to
so
the United
costly.
States runoff?
But how costly is that, Aaron?
All I'm
You
saying
see?
is,
You-
is the
tremendous
cost more important than the voters being able to decide from the ballot box?
But if the intention of the voter can be
Determined.
determined by the forensic process of a court, by
What
people
if the
who have
voter
no
is
issue,
uncomfortable with that?
well, then the voter wants to live in
Voter
a country
feels like the court
different from
process.
the rule of law.
But I mean, that's-
I'm just
but-
saying the
but
rule of
no,
law
but-
is to be questioned.
Yeah, but why?
Wow.
But,
It
can
but
be
why?
adjusted.
No, but let's.
They
I mean,
pass
let-
different laws in Parliament every day.
Yeah, but I mean, but let's take it to its extreme. If you want to settle all differences in the street, well, if you and I have a difference with each other, well, we go in the street and whoever win the fight and whoever dared, then that's the one who loses. You understand? And so if you take it to
Julian.
its illogical conclusion,
intruder.
you have an uncivil society, an
Yes.
unmanageable society, a society that has no rules and regulations. That can't happen.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
see?
No.
And so in this process, I think what people fail to realize is that we have protest votes in every election, you know.
Yes.
In every single election, we
Yes.
have protest
No,
votes.
I've seen it myself.
It's just that this is the first time
They've
that the
come
protest
to
votes
being
have
critical.
outnumbered the margin of victory.
Yes.
It's the first time,
Yes.
right? And so now it's come to fruition. And so in this thing, we got to see, as Dr. Johnson said, the true impact of the legislation and our democracy uncovering and revealing the will of the voters
yeah.
in that constituency.
Perfect.
Well, what I'm suggesting is there are people who have called me, contacted me that says that they don't quite know if that is the will of the voters. And further to that, based on my suggestion about margin of error, I personally am not comfortable if an election is not won by more than 300 with the kind of challenges
You
that
want a
we've
clear
seen.
mandate.
Yeah, I need to know that you have won. If you win by 50 and Pinewood go to court and 60-something are problematic, I'm uncomfortable.
But let me ask you about
what
the
I'm
people who
saying is
didn't vote.
this will of the people term that's being thrown around as being established. Is it or is it not established? Or shall we just say, man, we don't really know, but the court process says this and
Yes.
we're going to go with this?
Could
Are
be
we
improved,
settling? Because I don't like the idea that this is really transparent. I think we're settling for something that really ain't working.
Well, no, we're settling for the best that has worked so far. Not to say that it is not capable of improvement. But let me ask, following on your question,
Yes.
how do you address the people who didn't vote then?
The people who didn't vote either decide that they were going to be disenfranchised in the first place and didn't want to participate, or were simply disinterested. And
So you don't think no weight should be given to that then?
Well, weight should be given to that. But,
How would you,
for
how
example,
would you qualify
in
it?
2007 general election, there was no turnout less than 84%.
That's right. It was remarkable.
No turnout less than 84%.
Yes.
In this election, this turnout was down to 60%.
Yes.
But that's not true.
3/5.
But that's not true.
Why do you
a
say
lot of
that?
them weren't there.
It's not true. I mean, you see, and this is. I mean, I've heard this over and over,
Yeah.
and it's a mistake.
Okay,
You
what is the
understand?
mistake?
The mistake is that you are assuming that those people who did not show up to vote were legally entitled to vote.
But
We're real people.
they were on the
not-
register.
but they were not entitled
But
to
this
vote.
is the same integral register that
But I'm telling
established
you,
by the
but-
court that
but-
these people are who
No,
they are, and
no.
now we have a vote victory.
But that's not the point. No, you
But
missing
this
the
why
whole
I
point.
need
That's not what the
300
court
to
is
be
saying.
comfortable.
But that's not the point. You understand? The point is that, you know, I know those who are trying to espouse for a third party would like to believe that a third of the voters did not show up to vote.
Okay.
Who won the
There were
register.
1,800
Yeah,
approximately.
That's right.
So let's say for the sake of argument,
Say 1,400.
Mr. Fitzgerald,
I'd say
that-
14 to 1,500 of them
Okay.
were moved out. They
Let's
were not
say
there.
for the sake of
I would say
argument-
about 300 people in Elizabeth did not intentionally want to register and entitled to vote, did not vote. There's no more than that. And for whatever reason, they had different reasons for not voting.
Okay.
I gave you an example in a polling division that I worked. 1 out of 12 polling divisions that I worked, where over 200 people had moved out. That's 1 of 12.
Okay.
You understand? Now you multiply that out.
Let me ask a question then. Let's say for the sake of argument that 1,000
Yes.
of the 1,400 weren't supposed to be in Elizabeth. And we have 400 left.
Yeah.
What are they? Who are they? Are they disenfranchised persons
they-
who assume
third, fourth
disenfranchisement?
They could be
Are
third,
they persons
fourth.
who
They
didn't
could
want
be
to vote?
persons for whatever reasons did not. I can tell you, when we went to register people, we only had a short window to register people. Some people did not want to register because it wasn't a general election. Some
Disinterest.
legitimately
Yeah.
just not interested.
Yeah.
Some of them didn't think they going to register would make a difference in government, and so they had no interest in doing it. Some of them didn't know the candidates and didn't feel that, well, if I go register, I have time to know them. Some of them just didn't want to register. Some of them were disillusioned with both parties. You understand? Some were disillusioned with politics, period.
Yes.
The point I'm making is everybody had a reason as to why they didn't register. And in that short window, you didn't have an opportunity
To
in
get-
order
yeah.
to get to them, to get them to register
Yeah.
in that period of time, like you do during a general election. And so to use Elizabeth to come up with some sort of explanation as to why that third did not vote, and to say that they were dissatisfied or disinterested or they want to support a third party, I just say that that evidence on the ground did not suggest that.
So you're suggesting that the evidence on the ground is saying that the majority of those persons who did not vote were either not in the
Not in there.
constituency.
Not in there.
But what I've said is
Not in there.
if you are right to the tune of 1,000 persons,
It's more than that.
Okay,
I'm not.
1,200.
Listen, we did a poll.
there are still 300 persons there in
Yes.
1,500
10%.
that didn't participate.
No, there's 10% of less than 10% of the over 3,000 people that
More than
voted.
that, more
Okay.
than
No,
that.
don't take
More
it
than
from
that,
me.
more than
If you have 3,200 people that voted, right, and you have 3,200 people that voted, and you have 300 people that
didn't show
did
up.
not show up to vote, that's less than 10%.
Well, at
That's
the
the
end
point
of
I'm
the
making
day,
you,
all
which
we
is
can really
consistent.
do-
Hold on, which is consistent
With the
with
general
the
election
general
figures.
election percentage, and that's the argument I've been making from day one.
But
what we
all
saw
we
in
can really
Elizabeth,
know, though, is that 1,800 people didn't participate, the register is corrupted, and we have 3 votes
that part is true.
that have determined
That part is true.
that a man wins the election.
But
and
1,500
all
out
I'm
of 1,800
suggesting
were not entitled
is
to
that
vote.
I don't know about
No, I'm
it.
telling
There
you
is
that.
another
I'm not-
point.
listen.
But we don't have proof to that.
People-
All I'm saying
I
is
have
were
proof
people
of
who
it.
voted
we
But I have
have
proof of it.
a
Third
margin
parties.
of victory
But I
that
have
is
proof
3
of it.
votes.
You see, I have proof
And
of
we
it.
have 1,800 obscure
But listen to me.
non-voting
And,
voters.
Listen to me.
and votes for third party. Over
Yes.
200 and
Over
odd votes
200.
were indeed
Yeah, no,
cast
third party.
when there's nothing much to be
Listen,
gained.
The
you
point
can
of this
accept it or
is,
not,
though,
but we have proof. And what I mean, we have proof
But
is
that
that
proof
we
is
went,
certified by whom?
we have proof on the ground, going house by house, day by
you
day.
can't give me proof on the ground. I need proof.
Well, I don't know
need
where you
proof
get proof.
certifiable in court.
You have
because
a
the
good
court
point,
made
you
the
see.
decision.
Well, you didn't
All
say
I'm
don't go to
saying-
court. Now you say it work on the ground. You say that's
I
go
say
fight on the
court
ground.
make you uncomfortable.
understand?
You have a
All
point.
I'm saying
But we
is
went on the ground
3
and we
votes,
could not find the people.
3 votes can never make me comfortable to decide a member of parliament when there are 1,800 that we don't know
No,
what happened
it's
with
a
them.
it's a valid point.
Yeah.
You have a
And
valid
that-
point, and
there-
it points
there's
to
something wrong
it,
here.
it points to the need to make sure that the recommendations made by the court were indeed followed.
And I-
You see,
but I-
and,
let
me
and
make
that
another
you
point.
can have a
Could
register
compel them
which
to
is
do something.
actually accurate.
Yeah.
Yes.
But
That's
let me
what
make-
it really what you were saying is that the register and Jerome as well, because we couldn't find people. I was in there early because
they
Mr.
weren't
Stewart was the first candidate to declare, and his experience that there were people you couldn't find was indeed accurate. But it points to the need for the whole question of the register to be taken more seriously,
Yes.
and this is
Definitely.
where the parliamentary registration officers dropped the ball.
Absolutely.
And they need to be better funded, they need to have staff training, and any registration exercise must be done in a way that allows what Jerome is saying, for us to go and check.
Yeah.
Can we find these people? Can we
Yeah,
be a part of the process to help them
Yeah.
to make sure that the register doesn't have 1,000 names that are really not supposed to be in this constituency?
Absolutely.
you
But
see?
let me just say
Last
this last
word.
point
Last
is that
word.
we have the best little democracy in the world.
It's
The
definitely this
Bahamas
region.
has probably the highest voter turnout of anywhere in the
Yes,
world.
yes,
You
that is
understand?
true.
So we cannot lose track of that. You have places like Great Britain.
Yes,
So you have
30-something percent.
30-some percent of the
30-something
population
percent.
vote.
Yeah.
And
You
America,
understand?
the same
America
time.
the
Yep,
same. You
yep.
understand? And so here we are in the Bahamas, where we have over 80%, most times
Yeah,
that is true.
90% voter turnout.
That is true.
And we are complaining about a 1-vote margin or a 2-vote margin. Listen here, our democracy works when it comes to elections.
It could be
just
improved.
wonder
It
if
could be improved. It
I
can
just
be improved.
wonder
Works.
if you'd be saying that if Mr. Sands would turn out.
It doesn't make a difference.
Well, I'd be
man.
saying the same thing. I don't know about Jerome, but
listen, it doesn't make a difference, man. At the end of
understand,
the
man.
day, when you have close to 90% of your population voting,
Yeah, you can hardly
or those who
improve
are
that.
qualified
Yeah.
to vote and on the register, you
Yeah.
have to accept
Yeah.
Well-
that your democracy is working, and who wins at the end of the day is the winner.
Well,
Well,
ladies and
I'd
gentlemen,
prefer to see proportional representation. As Aaron says, there's
Yeah.
room for improvement.
Yeah,
I
well,
agree.
there's always room
Much
for
room,
improvement.
yeah.
There's always
Yeah.
room for improvement.
Anyway, gentlemen, thank you very much. That's
Thank
been
you.
a good
Pleasure.
discussion.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first on Citizens Review. There's room for improvement, a lot of work to be done. Lawyers need to stop running the country. I'm sure they'll disagree. But we had a good conversation here today. I think you're more informed about the register. We'll be back after this break with our Citizens Review and our Citizens Arrest. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. The first thing I want to highlight is since I've started the show Citizens Review, I've gotten books from authors around the Bahamas. I never knew that there were so many Bahamians writing. I want to thank them. First of Alfonso Smith, who wrote 1010, the Bible 10. I got a DVD from Travolta Cooper, who did the movie on the Stafford Sands. And then I have this book that I got this weekend in Grand Bahama, Bahamian Cultures and the Factors That Impact Upon It. That is written by Donald McCartney, a good old teacher from the West End School. And then I just got these 3 books from Dr. Dexter Johnson, the first of which is Crisis in Paradise, the Bahamas at the Start of the Post-Tourism Era, An Introduction to Critical Problems in Bahamian Constitutional Law, which I will be reading, and the Law and the Legal System of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I want to know if justice is really for sale. Dr. Dexter Johnson is going to educate me. This week's Citizen of the Week, not the arrest yet, Citizen of the Week, is Bishop Neil Ellis. I want to highlight Bishop Neil Ellis for his new book, Pursuing the Glory. Dr. Ellis, Bishop Ellis, we appreciate you. You're a strong Bahamian. You're taking our name all over the world. Pursuing the Glory will be an excellent book. I'm sure you'll be successful. And I also want to thank you for getting Tyler Perry, who is my favorite movie maker, to bring Why Did I Get Married to premiere to the Bahamas. And a lot of us are going to enjoy that coming up in the next couple of weeks. Our citizens arrest this week. This is going to be short and quick, but to the point. Members of Parliament, listen very carefully. If you are going to bring up issues that get the Bahamian public all riled up, like marital rape and land reform, you have to finish the business. The House was prorogued yesterday, and now we have no business on the table. So we spent months talking about marital rape and if your wife could do this and if your husband could do that, and all of these ladies came forward, poured their hearts out. Psychologists gave their contributions. International scholars came in and testified as to why it is necessary. Women's rights activists. And all of a sudden, the House is prorogued, boom, off the table. And we don't know what is going to happen. My good friend Loretta Butler Turner fought hard to bring that forward. And I want to see Ms. Turner bring that back because women are pushing for their rights and we got to get it done. I'm sick and tired of House being prorogued. The rules and laws, everything is thrown out and nothing is dealt with the way it needs to be. Why bring it up if you're not going to deal with it? Say what you mean and mean what you say. The other issue is land reform. The journalist Paul Turnquest worked very hard, put his whole self on the line to get that issue exploited, and now the issue is being laid out. So Parliament, this week, you lock up. You're going to hell in a handbasket, just like G.B. Power, who down there charging people them wrong bills to making them pay power. You can't do that. People want to be assured that their rights are protected. If you're going to bring up these issues, man, explore them to the end and get them dealt with. Ladies and gentlemen, that's our show this week. Thank you to Donald McCartney. Thank you to Dexter Johnson, Senator Fitzgerald. We had a great show this week. We'll see you next week.